Hello everyone, this is Monica from KSR Datavizon. So in this session, we'll see about Docker and how will it be an add-on for the Devops. Okay, so getting into the video, we'll see the modules which we cover in this video. Okay, so these are the modules. Why to use Docker? What is Docker? Difference between Docker and virtual machine and basic commands which we use in Docker, right? Yeah. So, why to use Docker? So, for this, let's take a scenario where we have a developer and a tester. Once a developer develops his code, and that code is working fine in his system. But when the same code is being forwarded to a tester to test in his system, it is not working, right? Guess why? We may have a different answers for this, right? So like maybe a different OS and different system environments and many other things. So now what a developer and a tester or the people who has to see if the code is working or not, what they have to do. So what is the outcome for this, right? So for this there is a solution called Docker where we can have everything designed with the OS environment, everything, right? So where from there the Docker has came into the picture for packing, shipping, and running any sort of applications inside it, as it is a lightweight, portable, self-sufficient containers. Right. So now we will see what is Docker exactly is. Right. So Docker is a set of platforms as a service product that use OS level virtualization to deliver software in packages called containers. So the service has both free and premium tiers. So the software that hosts the containers is called Docker engine, right? This is a definition which we go through as a software terms, right? So if you see here, as in the picture, we have a Docker file and a Docker image with the Docker containers, right? So by seeing this picture, you can think of some sort like Docker file is there, which is going through Docker image, and then it is a Docker container, right? So before that, why Docker is here? So what is a Docker which is making so popular for in the current IT industry? Okay, so Docker is a software platform which allows you to build, test, deploy an application very quickly and fastly, right? So Docker is very popular because it makes it possible to get far more applications running on the same old server, and it also makes it easy to package, ship, and ship the programs as we learned before, right? Okay. So as I told, if you see the diagram here, the Docker file, image, Docker containers, etc., you will feel like there is some Docker file which is sending into a Docker image, and that's a Docker container, right? So we'll get into it clearly. Docker file is a text document. Okay, so in this text document, we have to write all the data commands which has to run for executing the code, right? So the Docker file contains of all these details which has to run. So this is a Docker file. So what is Docker image? So when a Docker file is built, a Docker image is being created. Okay. Since Docker image contains the application code, libraries, tools, dependencies, and other files needed to make an application run. So when this Docker image is run, right, this Docker image will create a Docker container. So this Docker container is a lightweight standalone executable package of a software that includes everything needed to run an application, like code runtime, system tools, system libraries, and setting, etc. Okay, so here, this is a Docker file which contains of all the commands and everything so that to run the code. And when this is built, a Docker image has been created by using this Docker. And when this Docker image is run, the Docker container is being built, right? So each individually it is a Docker container. When this multiple Docker containers comes and place here, then it is called a Docker hub, right? So the complete Docker containers are placed in a place called Docker hub, where this Docker is a client server application format, right? If you see here, if a client is sending something, the Docker host acts as a host and gives the things which are needed, like it makes from a Docker file to image to container, and then it serves to a particular application. So, which is called a client server application. Okay, so Docker is also a client server application. So, we'll go to the next module, which is called difference between Docker and virtual machine. So the differences are with four different creatures like operating system, performance, speed, and portability. Okay, so in the OS, the Docker shares the host OS kernel, whereas virtual machine does not do like so. Where the Docker here, it's a continuous based model where containers are spacked, which is used for executing an application, where the Docker shares the host as a OS kernel, right? So this multiple workloads can run on a single operating system in a Docker. Whereas in virtual machines, there is no container based model. So the space use where the users use along with the kernel space is being used here in the virtual machines. And it does not share the host as a kernel where the workload needs a complete OS or a hypervisor in between to maintain this OS levels. Okay, so that is a difference of OS comparison with the Docker and a virtual machine. Coming to performance, so Docker containers can start up quickly and result in less boot up time, whereas VM do not start quickly, right? So is it like this? So Docker containers results in a high performance as the same OS with no addition software, like hypervisions is required in the Docker. But whereas in the virtual machines, we required a hypervision for OS levels to be maintained, right? And Dockers can start up very quickly because and result in less boot up time because the OS is always up here. Whereas virtual machines, we have to make the use of hypervisor here to make the OS levels and bring up the applications up, right? So that is performance. And about the speed, it is having Docker is having a high speed, whereas virtual machine is slow. Because in Docker starts when an application is started, it starts with no delay as OS levels are already up and it is active. But in the virtual machines, we need to run individually as discussed. And about the portability of a Docker containers can create an application and store into a Docker image, but virtual machine cannot do that, right? And Docker container is smaller than virtual machine because of which the process of transferring the data, okay, or transferring the files on the host is slow on virtual machines when compared to the Docker. Okay, so these are the main differences which we have between the Docker and the virtual machine. So still few of the companies will use the virtual machines, but many of the organizations has already moved to Docker so that it will be easy for running a multiple applications on a single Docker, right? Okay, so then we'll move on to the basic commands in Docker, right? So Docker hyperversion. This command is used to show the Docker version information, right? Like what Docker has been installed, what version of a Docker has been installed in the system, right? So this is Docker hyphen version command. Next is Docker pull. So this command is used to pull the images from the Docker repository, right? Docker pull and the option is image name, right? That is the syntax. And coming to Docker run, this command is used to create a container from an image. So, like we have seen there before, from a Docker file, when it builds, it creates a Docker image, and when we run, it creates a Docker container. So the command used there is Docker run, right? And next one is Docker PS. So PS is used. This is used to list the running containers. So when we give the Docker PS, then this will list out the containers which are running. And we have a field or also called hyphen A. So which shows all the container list. Okay. So the next command is docker stop. So docker stop, this command is used to stop a running Docker. Okay. When the Docker is active, then you can use docker stop command to stop, right? So the next one is docker kill. So Docker kill, this is used to kill the containers, okay? Kills the container by stopping its execution immediately. When the, let's say, if a Docker container is been executing all the way, when we give the Docker kill option, then it kills the running container, right? Which is executing now. Okay? So this is Docker kill. And next is docker exe. So this command is used to access a running container, like to get into the docker exe or sudo exe with the options hyphen itid. So by using those commands and options, we can run use to access a running container.